You graduated the academy in the best shape of your life. 6 months of structured training, mandatory PT, a fitness test you had to pass just to get the badge. And then somewhere between year 2 and year 5, the weight started creeping up. The runs got shorter. The workouts stopped happening. And you told yourself it was the schedule, the shift work, the job. You weren't wrong, but you also didn't have the full picture. This video is about why that decline happens so fast, and more importantly, what you can do to stop it before it costs you something you can't get back. There's a stat I'm going to get to near the end of this that most people in law enforcement have never heard, and once you hear it, the way you think about fitness on this job will never be the same. Let's start with what's actually happening. Research out of Auburn University found that police officers begin their careers with above-average strength, but demonstrate greater declines with age than the general population. Read that again, not that cops start weak. They start strong. The problem is the rate of decline after that. Officers experience elevated levels of cardiovascular disease and associated risks, and they often show more marked fitness decreases with aging compared to the general population. So it's not just normal aging. Something about this job accelerates it. Here's the first piece of that puzzle, and it's the one that surprises people the most. Policing is not a physically active job. The image most people carry: constant foot chases, physical confrontations, high-intensity action. That's the highlight reel. The reality is almost the opposite. The vast majority of what officers do on any given shift involves sitting in a patrol car, writing reports, attending briefings, and waiting. The absence of ongoing physical requirements, combined with sedentary job demands, shift work, and occupational stress, contributes to long-term deconditioning. And here's the number that really puts it in perspective. Roughly 80 to 90% of an officer's daily duties involve sedentary tasks, paperwork, patrol, administrative work. The warrior image is mostly wrong, and that gap between the image and the reality is part of why so many officers don't take the fitness decline seriously until it's already happened. Shift work is known to decrease motivation to exercise and negatively impact sleep and diet. So you're not just sitting more than you expected, you're also sleeping worse, eating at weird hours, and the biological rhythm that normally supports recovery and energy is constantly disrupted. Your body doesn't know if it's supposed to be awake or asleep, and that confusion shows up on the scale and in the mirror within a year or two of hitting the street. Now the second piece, and this one is structural, meaning it's built into the system itself. When recruits enter the academy, they must demonstrate their ability to meet the physical demands of the job. However, only a small number of agencies require annual fitness tests to ensure officers remain physically prepared throughout their careers. Think about what that means in practice. You train for 6 months, you pass a fitness test, you get the badge, and then the physical standard essentially disappears. After police academy training is completed, officers should continue to maintain a high level of physical fitness. While being physically fit is important, few police departments have instituted routine physical testing of their officers. The academy fitness test is, for most officers, the career peak, and it's never repeated. No benchmark, no retest, no external pressure to maintain it. The structure that forced fitness in the academy gets removed the day you graduate, and nothing replaces it. So what happens when you remove the structure and add a sedentary schedule? Research suggests that police officers lose fitness as a result of their policing vocation, with occupational factors like stress, shift work, poor sleep, and poor diet all contributors to this loss. And one of the most telling markers of that loss is something most people would never think to measure. Maximum vertical jump decreased significantly as officers age. That might sound like a weird thing to care about, but it's not. Vertical jump is a direct measure of explosive power, fast-twitch muscle capability, the kind of strength that matters in a real physical altercation. It's not treadmill endurance. It's the ability to close distance fast, absorb a tackle, get back up, and keep going. And it declines faster in officers than in the general population. Adults who do not engage in regular strength training experience a decline in muscle strength of about 3% each year after age 50. And this loss affects balance, mobility, and the ability to meet the physical demands of the job. By the time an officer is in their mid-40s, They may look fine on the outside and be completely unprepared for the one moment the job actually demands everything they have. And here's where this stops being about fitness and starts being about survival. Police officers in the United States face roughly 30 to 70 times higher risk of sudden cardiac death when they're involved in stressful situations, suspect restraints, altercations, or chases, than when they're involved in routine or non-emergency activities. 30 to 70 times, not 30 to 70% higher. 30 to 70 times the baseline risk. And remember what the baseline is, a shift that's 80 to 90% sedentary. So you go from sitting in a car for 6 hours to a full-speed foot chase or a physical restraint, and your cardiovascular system, which has been quietly deconditioned for years, suddenly has to perform at maximum output with almost no warning. Researchers describe a dual-hit model, linking occupational stress to sudden cardiac death. Chronic stress-induced cardiovascular vulnerability combined with acute operational triggers. The way to understand this is simple. The damage isn't from one bad call, it's stacked. Police officers are a high-risk group due to unique chronic occupational stressors, chronic psychological hypervigilance, circadian disruption, sudden high-intensity physical exertion under stress, and delayed health-seeking behavior. Years of disrupted sleep, chronic stress hormones, poor diet, and minimal exercise load the gun. One intense call pulls the trigger. And it doesn't always happen in the moment. Heart attacks triggered by these adrenaline-driven physiological events often occur hours after the triggering incident. The collapse that happens at home that night may trace back to the foot chase that morning, and that connection almost never gets made in the way the story gets told afterward. Now here's the part that almost nobody talks about, and it's the reason I said stay with me at the beginning. A male police officer, aged 50 to 54 years, has close to a 40% probability of death, compared to a 1% probability for males in the general population in that same age category. 40% versus 1%. Same age group. One is a cop, one is an average guy. That's not a rounding error. That's a completely different mortality reality, and it's happening to people who wear body armor to work every single day and still somehow don't see the cardiovascular risk coming. Researchers found that the average age of law enforcement deaths was 53.7 years. For context, that's not even retirement age for most departments. So what do you actually do about it? The answer is not to go from zero to hero. And this is the part most fitness advice for cops gets completely wrong, because there's a counterintuitive danger buried in the solution itself. Physical training activities, which police don't consider to be particularly stressful, were associated with roughly 20 to 25 times higher sudden cardiac death risk than routine law enforcement work. The very fix getting back in shape carries its own elevated risk when it's approached the wrong way. An officer who's been sedentary for 5 years and then jumps into intense workouts is putting themselves in a physiologically similar position to the foot chase they're trying to prepare for. The cardiovascular system isn't ready for that kind of output. The answer is a progressive, consistent maintenance program, not a crash fitness push. Here's what that actually looks like in practice. The foundation is consistency over intensity. You're not training for a competition. You're training to keep your cardiovascular system resilient enough to handle the moments the job throws at you without warning. Structured physical exercise exerts multi-system cardiovascular protective effects, including autonomic rebalancing, anti-inflammatory modulation, improved endothelial function, enhanced cardiac reserve, and stabilization of myocardial electrophysiology. In plain language, regular exercise literally changes the way your heart responds to stress. It rebuilds the buffer that the job has been quietly eroding, but it has to be structured and progressive, not sporadic and ballistic. 3 to 4 sessions per week is the target. 2 of those should be strength-focused compound movements, nothing fancy, squats, presses, rows, hinges. The goal is to preserve fast-twitch muscle and explosive capacity, which is what the vertical jump data is actually measuring. 1 session should be moderate cardiovascular work, a 20 to 30-minute Zone 2 effort where you can still hold a conversation. And 1 session should include something that mimics the demands of the job, short, hard efforts followed by recovery. Interval work, Not because you need to be an athlete, but because your heart needs to practice going from low output to high output and recovering from it. That transition, from sitting in a car to a full sprint restraint, is exactly where the risk lives. Sleep matters more than most officers are willing to admit. Shift work is known to decrease motivation to exercise and negatively impact sleep and diet. And the research is clear that poor sleep accelerates cardiovascular decline. If you're working nights, protect your sleep window the same way you'd protect your training time. It's not optional. Nutrition doesn't need to be complicated. Enough protein to preserve muscle, roughly 0.7 to 1 gram per pound of body weight, and enough total calories to support energy without excess. The trap for shift workers is eating at odd hours out of boredom or stress, and the food available at 3 a.m. in a patrol car is almost never the food that helps. And one more thing, get a cardiovascular screening. Routine cardiovascular checks and age-appropriate screening, with leadership support and protected time, should be part of the job. Most officers who die from sudden cardiac events had warning signs that went unaddressed. A basic stress test and blood work won't take more than a morning, and what they can tell you about what's actually happening inside your cardiovascular system is worth far more than any workout program. Here's where we are. You started this video knowing the fitness decline was real. Now you know why it happens. The structure disappears at graduation. The job is far more sedentary than it looks. Shift work compounds everything, and the body quietly deconditions while the job keeps demanding peak output on a moment's notice. You know the 40% stat. You know the 30 to 70 times risk. And you know that the fix isn't a gym binge. It's a consistent, progressive, sustainable program that keeps your cardiovascular system ready for the one call that doesn't give you a warm-up. The officers who stay fit through a 20-year career don't do it because they're more motivated. They do it because they treat it like part of the job, same as qualifying on the range, same as keeping their gear maintained. It's not extra, it's the job. If this hit different than you expected, drop a comment below, especially if you're in law enforcement or know someone who is.